So tonight's joyful baby naming had me remembering. My husband and I knew what our son's name would be before he was even born. We knew his name before I was even pregnant. We knew his name for years, well before we were ready to become parents. My husband's Bubby, his grandmother, died in the summer of 2009. Her name was Charlene. She was strong and graceful and made terrific tuna salad. And she was so full of love that in the days following her death, one thought that helped my husband and I move beyond the initial shocking stages of grief was the moment we decided that should we ever have a son, he would be named Charlie for her. Throughout my pregnancy, I wondered, would our future son have the good fortune of being like his namesake? Would he have Charlene's love of laughter? Would having her name truly connect this baby to the great Bubby that he would never know? Jewish tradition implies that it would. It's customary, at least in Ashkenazi communities, to name our children after loved ones who have died. The hope is that the baby will exemplify the beloved qualities of the one who's left this earth, and perhaps in some way keep the memory of the one who is gone alive. Certainly, my husband and I had this in our minds when we named our son years before he existed. This week, we begin the second book of our Torah. The book that we usually call Exodus is literally called Names, or Shemot. The book begins with the phrase, "These are the names of the children of Israel who came to Egypt," and goes on to list each of Israel's sons individually by name. This would make more sense coming from the first book of Torah, from Bereshit, or Genesis. The first book of Torah is all about people. It tells the story of our ancestors' lives, their relationships, their families. But it is when we enter this next set of stories that Torah names these names. Torah reminds the reader of these previous generations. And then, in the next breath, Torah acknowledges that the new Pharaoh didn't know them. The new Pharaoh didn't know Joseph, didn't know Joseph's father or his father's father. The world surrounding the Israelite people didn't remember those generations carefully documented throughout Genesis. The book of Shemot may start with names, but it is a story of a people who are seeking their lost identity and hoping to be known once again. We learn from the Israelites' enslavement that when one is unknown or nameless, they may be overlooked. It is once we learn someone's name that we begin to care. As we explored last week in our discussion of Joseph, known in Egypt as Safnat Paneach, a person's name houses their identity. Our names help us to become real to those around us. For this reason, it is notable that the next named Israelite in our story is Moses. Moses, whose name means to draw out, is the one who calls God's attention back to Egypt. Only once a named Moses first acts out against the Israelite enslavement that God remembers Israel. God remembers the once made covenant with those ancestors of Israel. God remembers the relationship with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is through these names that God remembers. In Ron Wolfson's book, The Spirituality of Welcoming, he describes the experience of receiving an aliyah to Torah during a Shabbat morning service. He explains that the most thrilling part is when I am literally called by my name to bless God before and after the Torah reading. Ya'amod Gershom ben Avraham uvracha, arise Gershon, son of Avraham and Bracha. I am called by name to rise, to stand up, to come forward, to ascend the pulpit, to encounter the Torah. To be known heightens the spirituality of the moment. It bonds us in community. Hebrew names, which acknowledge our parents' names in connection with our own, validate our shared history, our ownership over this holy moment. Understanding this, Wolfson introduces names as a vital foundation for relationship building in synagogue. Names are important. That is why Moses' first inclination when he encounters God's presence at the burning bush is to ask God, "What do I call you? When I come to the Israelites and say to them that the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, they will ask me, 'What is God's name?'" Moses understands relationships. He knows that a name will help the Israelites draw nearer to God. Having a name for God will help them to believe. It will enable them to connect, to relate, to personalize. Just as a name helped God remember the Israelites, a name will help the Israelites begin to know God. This is why there are thousands of books and websites dedicated to helping parents choose the perfect names for their babies. This is why we honor the moment of giving a new baby her Hebrew name. There's a deep desire to find the perfect word to house this little person's identity, the sounds by which he or she will be known to the world. There's so much wrapped up in a name. I remember the first time my son revealed to us his deep, easy belly laugh. My first thought was, there she is. It seemed like proof that his great bubby is written into the core of his soul. That baby giggle was the first glimpse of his sense of humor, a quality that would surely bring her memory to life for years to come. And now, years later, as he continues to grow, telling jokes and stories and learning to express himself, we see even more clearly the ways that Charlie is like Charlene. We also see the ways that he is only and truly like himself. Moses asks to know God's name, and God gives Moses an answer. As Moses stands in the presence of the eternal before a bush that is burning and burning, God names God's self. Ehyeh, Asher, Ehyeh. A play on the verb to be. God's name is a phrase that defies tense and time. I was what I was. I am what I am. I will be what I will be. The name God gives is about process, about becoming. It is God's revealing of God's self as an action that stretches from before time to a time beyond. The book of Shemot is not a story of individuals. It is the story of a people. It is the story of a people becoming themselves, growing into an identity. The Israelites are named for a man called Israel, the one who persevered with beings both divine and human. The book of Shemot details the perseverance of this people as they grow into this strong and holy name. Our names, like God's name, are not an ending point. Our names are where we begin. Our names represent promise and aspiration. A name is about becoming. We will be who we will be. It is only at the end of our lives that those who knew us can say what our names have meant, what our memory will evoke for the next generation. And in the here and now, we will live. We will live up to the essence of our given names and the names that we choose for ourselves. It is up to each one of us to make the meaning, to chart the journey, to be what we were, what we are, and to become all that we hope to be. Shabbat Shalom, and a happy second New Year.